Nipa gunle namdul shing yenden gunje genpa bo simchen gunje nyen chigun tamje kenla gun chan sen omen choge inge podan e dusum sangye gunje ngogo ni rasim chugu ngusuma densebe saive lame shabla so wande dambichu nyamsu lembi kunung sambu nijungi sambadang janshub yesemdang tembe koni lungi chodi tebadang sambe koni nyamsu lembar shu
Please start by giving rise to most excellent pure intention, that of renunciation and bodhicitta, the necessary intentions for practicing the sacred Dharma, thinking that I am going to practice the sacred Dharma by means of studying and reflecting on the Dharma of scriptural transmission.
teni tang anzu Gyud Lama di ngonro ki tsudula teni kasa tenju deki kyabchungi lukyu tang deki chuchakari yimen tang teni deki goba dinzu kari yimen sini dinzu shubi kabre
Right now, we're still in the process of preparing ourselves to engage with this treatise, the Uttaratantra Shastra. So in the last few sessions, what we have been doing, we have been learning about the history of the transmission of this text. We have been learning about the main subject matter of this text and the reasons for studying it. So that's what we are still doing.
di ina yang kasang ki shooting ki kapsula teni nge tenpa chumden deki rangi semni yonsu tu teni sangi tenpa in songwa tang teni chachin malam dinsu nangla tuliang semla toliang semme ten chodo tamche semla chopra shok sini tanganzu nangba ki chwe di nyamlen che ki shiza dawa di semmam nambar shepa sayadila cha digi yoba yindu teni kasa tanganzu gom gyabe kapsula yang semla lega chigi yore pangdo ki keche shebe kapsula yang sem ki toni shagi yore dedan deka nashin nyamlen chebe kapsula tse nga chi sayadang le gyumde sayada wadang ta tende ki iche chasang de yang shiza sem sayajik sari ki danyi chik yobar ke lang tubam iche ke tubayina dinsu chasang la yang samlo tanya da yobatang ta inchi ke la ma sona it makes sense irwa teni sem sayadi nyeshi ke ma tubatang samlo tang ma tubata lebat samchi ma to samlo tang ma tu bai na an tin su la ya yi she da ni she ke la ka le kha bo yore de yin bai du nge ke nam ba la ta sim se di kan de jin sa re se di samlo tang go re se di shu bai la de ni mu tu ni de ni sang yin na ni yang an zu kapto kin choja dan jaba yong du ani nge rimba shin du de su ko la ma kale chi ni shu gi ins
Konde na chik cheson, na co di sem di ngeshe gova ramalena, tene kare kali kakpo, chigere, di chik.
ta ngan su nangba sanje pe ke yi che ke nang ni tse nga chi de le gyun de den su dan yi che ki tom shi da war wa den su yang sem se chi ngolin che tu bai na den su cha sang da sam da tang gyu yore sem ki to ni sha ko yo ba yin du ta sem se chi la ngi she ma ke bai na den su yang ka le kha go yore
In the last session, we have been discussing what is meant by the mind, because the Buddha himself has stated that taming one's own mind, working on one's own mind, is the main teachings of the Buddha. And as it is clearly and beautifully stated in the Mahamudra aspiration prayer in verse 14, appearance is mind, emptiness is also mind, realization is mind, confusion is also mind, birth is mind, cessation is also mind. So we need to cut through all the doubts about the mind. So the mind, it's the foundation really for all the Dharma teachings. Right? Whenever we engage in the practice of meditation, what we are doing, we are really working with the mind. Whenever we are concerned with abandoning clear away what is to be cleared away, whenever we are concerned with what is to be attained and realized, all of that comes down to the mind. It has something to do with the mind. This capacity of being clear, cognizant, and aware. That's what we call the mind. And it is the foundation for our own happiness and our own sadness. All these moments, good and bad, they all stem forth from this mind, this cognizant capacity to be clear and aware, right? It makes sense that we need to understand what is meant by the mind. Because unless we have confidence, certainty, what is this mind? What is this cognizant capacity to be aware? We will not be able to really fully comprehend the Buddha's teachings on karma, cause and effect, on past and future lives, right? Because all of those teachings, they really rest on the notion of, they rest on understanding of the mind. So they are all connected to the mind. So that's why I have spoken in length in the last Dharma session about the mind. And in the future, whenever we kind of touch the subject of the mind in the text, I will go back to explain more and more, clarify more points about the mind.
tene ta chi dang ta dup gi ngani she bai na yang pena nang be ki ta dup gi nang la sem gi ngo dang sem gi namba dang jile gi ko la shira gya chum bu sung yore
And also, when it comes to the Buddhist view and philosophy, a little bit more of technical philosophical studies, there we also have a lot of details about the mind, its nature, its functions, its its aspects, right? They explain the philosophy and views of the Dharma, go into great detail, explain all those points that have to do with the mind.
tene ngaran su 맹아다고 지기 찬에 선로땅 바이나니 툴바 이셰수 샤르바 세그레 디 식니기 낭라 코르와당 냥데니가 뉴데레 숭바레 ngaransu semdi 툴바 임바딜라 가리세기오레스나 코르와 세기오레스 디니 덴데기 툴바 임바 ngosheni 디니 예실라 네 규용도 가르쳐버렸으니 냥을 대바 차버렸으니 지준 잠바 공복이 되니 춘이 남제 나라 디콜라 시라게 세부스메요레
Also in the tradition of the PIF essential instructions. Again, what we do, we learn, about the mind, we engage with the mind. In that tradition, the main practice has to do with transforming our confusion into wakefulness, letting our confusion dawn as wakefulness, as wisdom. And actually in that one point, right, confusion transforming into wisdom, the whole of samsara and nirvana are included. So whenever our mind is confused, that's samsara. Whenever we recognize that confusion for what it really is, that confusion transforms into wakefulness, into that primordial wisdom. That's nirvana. And that's what the Lord Maitreya has explained in great detail in his other treatise, distinguishing Dharma from Dharmata, or we can say in English, distinguishing phenomena from their pure essence. That's the name of that treatise. Lasso.
다드니 ngaranzu danda 수수기 nyongwala jawaina dorduina detuk ki tsawadi sem yimbachi dewa juna yang so nani yugi yobatang dunga juna yang so nani chungi yobachi sem ki teni chungi yobachi sem ki sweshabachi sem ki tswaji yimbala samlotaya di ta nganzu nyamlen che ki rimbachi chati gyore nangbaji yimbechani
Nampa impechane, nampa di kapsu aspect. Are Buddhist. Gonda nangpa lasso. Also, if we connect the teachings on the mind with our own personal experience, our own practice, again, this teaching on the mind become extremely relevant because we can see that all our experience, that of suffering, discontentment, pain, and our own experiences of pleasure and happiness, they have something to do with our mind. Actually, they're rooted in the mind. All those happy and sad experiences arise from the mind, and they are experienced by the mind. And so if we understand that, again, this kind of understanding becomes for us the, practice, that becomes the stages of our practice. It clearly explains to us how we can then engage in our practice as being a Buddhist, right? For us, that becomes extremely relevant in our personal practice.
다디치다 니수 사와다와텐데 미세카 마레 페낭안수 따듭기 토니 삼로타나 늪쪽에 갸가라양 데비찰라 웨스턴 아이디얼리즘 다든수 망부 중요하와 디는 아주 낭바 산지 발라양 지당 지바레 이내양 다데 쪼고 짤든도 난긴다고디 요가차람 지타 마트린세는 콘나바게다 디콜라 시라기 띵사보단 갸첨보 심주제니 살람켓 남샤 림바 망고치 띵니 샤요레
This idea that everything is rooted in the mind, all our experiences created by the mind, is not something new, like only Buddhists have that, actually. It's not true. In the West, there are also philosophical schools, that came to be in the past, such as the school of Western idealism. And generally, it's really quite same with the view of the Buddha Dharma, but specifically that Western idealism is pretty much the same as the views of one specific school of the Buddha Dharma. That's the school of Chittamatrians, the mind-only school. The school that especially emphasizes that notion of the mind and clearly explains the paths and the bodhisattva stages, the bhumis, and how that has to do something with the mind.
Chidang nuchoki semzo mawa idealism dang nangbeki yoga chare ni pala tumbi chaya mangbo yorela ya nangba korangi tumong maimbi to batinde ya mangbo yore tindu chigwa chigyaya mare
As the Western idealism shares quite many ideas with the Yogacara in Buddhist school, it doesn't mean that all their ideas are the same across the board. Actually, Yogacharans have their own unique perspectives and teachings on the mind that are not necessarily found in the example Western idealism.
Peshana nganzu ta nuchoki Rene Descartes koranzu ki chi namju I think therefore I am said in the yorwa tinzu tatso di nga se di zugu sa di peche think se di kanga lep dingi suro yungudwa.
Like in the West, renowned scholar René Descartes famously stated, "I think, therefore I am." So you see, again, everything is pointed to this I, right? And one's own thinking, one's own mind, thinking mind.
Tangi nupchoki tarupkole shigme inayang tatinde snechik sosogi samla tangdu di tende tawo tawashitu samsam tawashiti tende tsuwachilikidwa chikchena nga nori yindo lapshig marwa.
Of course, I'm not an expert on the Western philosophy, so please, forgive me if I make any mistakes. That's just my personal understanding. That's something kind of how I understood these teachings. And of course, I don't know much, but it seemed to me that there's a lot of parallels between that kind of Western idealism and the Yogacara.
Ta nangbeki tatupki kejeshi yongdu choklang tang chodak kong nambeki shungen nangla shepa tang pembuse di yewa yakwaji che ngogo tate yinba chula sha ta tso karirki tubi yungu yore sena shepeki nyelengi gyuyi na 아니 코랑기 녀랭기 규딩에 버도 사리기 ngoji 인고그레 마도 뱀베 취지기 사리 마인켄지기 사리기 다니신기 녀랭기 규제도 말해 제자 다다기 셈데양 ngo마기 넘버 쉐바지기더니 녀랭기 규제니 기고 그래스 덴데스니더니 강달 뱀보단 셰바니기 예와디 세보지 체베 토네 셰바 요바당 대양드니 셰바기 균디지 무투니 도규 요데바지라 망보시라 두비어다 이내양다 나딘주 차상 슈데바이나드니 아주 고뇨도 그래라 켄나마 식되여나 초랭 초다기 세만 남들도 나라 식바이나 딘주 콜라 세션나요레.
In the Buddhist philosophical, say, tenet systems, schools, and specifically we have to say here, we're talking about Buddhist view as it was expounded by scholars such as Dignaga and Dharmakirti. So in that Buddhist view, the consciousness and the matter are of separate essence. right, of separate nature, consciousness and matter. And Dignaga and Dharmakirti explained in great length that the main perpetuating cause of the consciousness has to be of the same nature as the consciousness itself. That is to say, the cause of main perpetuating cause of consciousness has also to be clear and aware and cognizant. Something that's unaware, not doesn't have that nature of clarity and cognizance, cannot produce the stream of mind. In this way, they say that matter cannot produce the mind, right? Because matter lacks that ability to be cognizant, clear, and aware. So only something clear, aware, and cognizant can produce the mind, which is, well, we all know it's the nature of being clear and aware. So in this way, they say that it's matter cannot give rise to mind. Only something of same nature of the mind can give rise to the mind. And what's of the same nature? Well, it's the previous moments of mind. In this way, they establish that there is this continuity of consciousness, that it arises from the previous moments of consciousness that are of the same nature as this moment of consciousness, and so on and so forth. So it's completely different than from matter, material things that cannot really produce the mind. In this way, they explain again quite beautifully, and they elaborated a lot on this uninterrupted continuity of the mind. Right? It cannot be interrupted, this kind of flow, continuum of the mind. But unfortunately, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this view of set forth by Dignaga and Dharmakirti, because then it will become really maybe quite complicated, and we'll spend a lot of time on that. So if you are really interested in this specific topic, then please look yourself into the texts such as Pramana Vartaka, like the commentary on Pramana, the commentary on Buddhist epistemology.
다 dorduina simsedi sariki dangi jengi cheji yimbatan deidini gyunsedia mutuni yungu yobati shilashani gyumsin de lokoni dini ngaju nangba sanje paki tsenga chitang legumde se chasangdi dindesma dubyungu yore.
In short, establishing the mind consciousness as being by nature cognizant, clear, and aware, and so then establishing the uninterrupted continuity of that consciousness that's clear and aware, the Buddhist, therefore, can explain how karma works, right? How can causes and conditions give rise to consequences? How past and future lives make sense. So all of those teachings on karma, past and future lives really are rooted, we can say grounded, on the firm understanding of the nature of the mind, being clear and aware, and the uninterrupted continuity, the flow of that mind.
Teninge khasan shubana shinda ngaju che dosune samlodan yongde semse di yamtsen bodo chere. Gawa do sine ta yongde mebe soda chere tongju mebaji yebdan kado kaya mebaji. Ta yo mare slabnani yang yo mare slabin korang hagung korang yang sem chaderwa. Sem di mena sem yo mare sine kaduina ta chu tugu mare. Ta denyi di ngarang zola sorwa di galba dawa chungudu wa. Teni chaji malam nangla sungba ina galgi mare sungbare. Yoba main gyawe kyang mas meba main korde kunjishin galdu main sungju ume lam sayadi. Di indi ta tende ki yume nyi di galwa main bachikla tok tu kugore. Samatang tu kugore.
If we think about the so-called mind or consciousness. It's really special. It's really interesting, kind of like tricky, because if we really try to pin down, like pinpoint, what is this mind? Where is it? Like, what is this mind? We can't really find it. We can't find the mind of specific shape, form, or color. And yet, if we then say, well, I didn't find the mind, there is no mind, the one who says it, the one who understands that there is no mind, well, what is it? It's the mind, right? What else is understanding and that there is no mind? So it seems to be really contradictory then. We didn't find the mind, and yet the one who doesn't find the mind is the mind. So it seems as contradiction, but in reality it's not. As it is said in the Mahamudra Respiration Prayer, verse 11, it is not existent as even the Buddhas have not seen it. But it is also not non-existent, because it is the basis of everything, samsara and nirvana. And this is not a contradiction. It is the middle way of unity. So this is not a contradiction. It's unity and middle way, and that's what we really need to understand. We need to try our best to realize that unity of the middle way, that lack of contradiction.
라서 다 디체 되니 아주 가상 아 사지 제용도 아주 딘주디기 첸 쉬베까브레 되니 아 딘주디기 첸라 택바침보 Gyud Lama 딘주스니 숨 여바레 돈다 숨다보지 되니 디당 델베토니 되니 네 딘주디기 중랍당 셔자당 거바 데숨데 마슈기 인스니 다디간다 가장 아주 당보 딘주디기 중랍 택바침보세 디콜레슈비 카브라와
So now, speaking of the outline of our Dharma sessions, in the previous Dharma sessions, I have mentioned that we are going, what we are actually, sorry, let me start again. In the previous Dharma sessions, I said that what we are concerned with here, it's a title of this text, plain. And the title, of this text consists of three parts: Mahayana, Treatise of Uttaratantra Shastra. So like we have Mahayana in the title, we have the treatise, the word treatise, and we have this kind of Gyud Lama, right? The highest continuum. So in relation to the title, kind of connecting with the title, I have already started to explain the history of this treatise, the subject matter of this treatise, and the purpose of this treatise, right? There's 3 points of our preparatory kind of studies. So we have been looking actually in the last classes the first of these 3 parts, which is the history of this treatise, how it came to be, and we connected that with the first part of the title, which is Mahayana. Right? So this word Mahayana, or great vehicle in English, that's how we started talking about the history of this treatise.
다되니 당보 택바침보스디 택바디 지당 람당 디부니가 놓고 주그래 이네 값수 바바 조디 람딜라 고고거래 산제기 고방라 켈켄다 딩겐기 람딜라 되니 쳔보세디 가르치네 라바레스나 코랑라 믹발라 소파 키치 망보지 덴데요레 제사 아니 대바 쳔볼 라바레스
Mhm. And so, what we have been looking at a few sessions ago as this meaning of Mahayana, that Sanskrit term, great vehicle in English. So, great vehicle, right? Two parts there. Well, vehicle can be connected to both the path and the fruition. And in our context right now, vehicle is connected to the path. It what carries us to the state of a Buddha. That's the vehicle, right? Why do we call it great? Well, I have already started to explain that this particular vehicle is endowed with really special features such as great focus or great objective and so on and so forth. So, and that's where we have left off a few Dharma sessions ago.
다더니 첨부세디 나게기 칙소라고지 고디갑라 딘데 용쓰바래 nga chimbo yin ane ko chung chung re sing so da wuchi yine ya di kap su chimbo se du zo gari sung go re sna kerang ki chue di pu da bo chi je bala ane ke chue din din chi chang go re sni da di su su ki dos ko wa le di ke chu bore pena nga ki chue ji je yong de kap su la mikpa chimbo duba chimbo din zo chang de ba ina nge chue di pu da bo cha bare te ba chimbo ge chue 다 denzo nani masang bai na nge chue di pu da bu cha gi min du sni tende samlo tai di ge chimbo yin sare ting du ma do yang chimbo se du ji nga chimbo yin sam sam da wa tende nga ge so da lep de bai na tene ta da ji re gi min wa
When we engage with this great vehicle, like that's our practice, that's our path, there's a danger that we could misinterpret this whole term great vehicle, thinking that somehow because we are practicing this great vehicle, we are great. And others who practice something else, they are small. They are not as great, right? That would be really pity if we have taking this term great in this way, because it's really not correct. Because in this context, why do we have this term great? It sort of it helps us to evaluate our dharma practice and see if what we are practicing, our dharma, is pure or not. Because now we know that the great vehicle is endowed with these great qualities. So this greatness actually has something to do with the special features and qualities, right? Like special focus, special accomplishments, special or great, let's say great focus, great accomplishments, great practice. That's why it's great, right? And so now we can see, oh, is my own personal dharma practice has those great qualities? Is my practice is endowed with this great focus? Is my practice is endowed with these great accomplishments? And then we can understand, well, then my practice is pure. And if it's not, then my practice is not pure. So this greatness really helps us to kind of evaluate our practice and see if it's pure or not. And this greatness has nothing to do with us being great, right? There would be a complete understanding. Sorry, there would be a wrong understanding. Yes.
laso tene da ka sang nge te ba chimbo ki chue di nyamlen je yong du tene chimbo keju tende dang tembe ko ni nyamlin che ko gre se ti loben thome ki namthar la nga ju samlo tang ba ina ani dini nga ju ha ko tu gre se ni didan jel be ko ni shibe ka bre ta ni ka sang nge mikpa chimbo dang ta din ju ko le dini tabla ke ba chimbo dang din ju ko le shi ba re
So in a few Dharma sessions ago, we started looking at least of the great qualities of the Mahayana Dharma, So when we practice the Mahayana Dharma, we can see that it has these great qualities. And I actually, in my explanation of those qualities, I connected it with the life story with the liberation story, hagiography of Asanga, Maitreya, Buddha, Asanga, right? So that's where we have left off a few classes ago, where we can understand these great qualities. We already looked at the first one, like great focus. We've looked at the great skillful means of the Mahayana, right? And related that to the personal life liberation story of Maitreya and Asanga.
Ta loben tome tabla kebe koni jujun chamba tup lo junyi la tup ni tini da lo sum tup tini shal masik yang kong ma pe yang ya pe tup inde chini lo junyi la tup bare sung bare tini lo junyi la tup na yang jujun chamba shal masik yondi kong to su da lo pham ni tini ma ta nga zu ina cham dol ni ma dongke la pe bare sung bare 당에 남다디 dordu
So let's continue looking at this liberation story of Asanga. And I'm explaining it, of course, in a very brief, concise manner. So Asanga has been practicing Buddha Maitreya, his personal superior deity, for 12 years in retreat. And at the end of this 12-year retreat, he still hasn't accomplished his deity, hasn't beheld the face of his deity, the Buddha Maitreya. So he grew increasingly weary and disappointed, has left his retreat and went into town, into the village.
다 디기드니 먼저 대과 첨보기 기주직디 가르레스나 준디 첨보 세지 여래 리송디 남규 안조다 택진기 람두발라 깔진 담에 숨기 파르돌라티니 준디 좀기에 송래 다 강달 콩 테마 망보지 로숨 두 yang shal masi yongdu yang ma pe ye yang ende chinda tema mangbo che bare ine semshu ma sha ne ma cha ne tini lo junyi badu la tube di ta ngarang su teba chimbo ki kechu chik di zundu di tini namju nga su takjur ki zundu dang gujur ki zundu se garwa lega gari che ba ine yang tos che ane lamsang dibu tungu midu suni yuk ma sha wa chini gyun rumbu chik tini tube di la tini nga su 준비 첨보 세기 계주디 아주 삼바탄 주고를 되는 것도
This part of Asanga's life story, his continuous practice for the duration of 12 years, illustrates another quality, another greatness of the Mahayana, which is known as diligence, great diligence, you can say great perseverance, because it is said that to really accomplish the path of the great vehicle, it takes 3 incountable eons, kalpas, so extremely long time. And we can see that Asanga, well, even though after 3 years he already kind of was, disappointed a bit, he didn't give up, he continued. Then another, 3 years passed, so 6 years he spent in retreat, and again he checked and he hasn't accomplished Maitreya Buddha, and yet he still didn't give up. He again stayed in retreat, and again he continued, and like that for 12 years. And what it shows us, he shows his, continuous joyful application of diligence, because diligence has these few different aspects in the Buddha Dharma. The one is this kind of continuous application, right? That you don't give up after some time, but you really continuously practice and joyfully practice. And we can see all of those aspects present in Asanga's life story. So we can learn then from that this special feature special quality of greatness of the Mahayana, which is great effort, great diligence.
Dini loben tome tosu tu da pam dinde da mala pe yongdu dini ki ne baji kongi sigbare sungbare ki la dinde ma dinde chande baji da kongi dini ki di dinde ki subu me chasang di ma tunde bayi na de di dadung ji nga ge to shedang ji ni mil muk de ba dinde kongi che yong de ni woni kongi tu la dini ngar da mi da we ki simjin se de da woni le da nyom ma ki rawa me ba dinde ji resha seni jumin ki 닝제 shu chung ba ji ge ni da di ki gi mala yobe ki budin zu ji zangma suyo kuku du deni kong dos tangan suyo ina ji jile girwa lakbe le na bushi du girwa ni jile gin budi dine da yongdu kapsula dini kimo ki gi rodi ki gi neba di dini dos mik da yongdu dini ki ma yinba jini jizun jamba kumbo dinla ngosum du shuk deya badi kongi shal sigbare sungbare.
In this way, after 12 years of continuous application of his practice, diligently practicing in retreat, Asanga still hasn't behold his deity Maitreya, so he got somewhat discouraged and left retreat, and he set forth to the village nearby. And then on the road, he has seen a dog. So he saw a dog. The dog that half of the body, the low part of the body, was just one big wound. That was the wound that was kind of like eaten alive by maggots. So that was like filled with maggots that were eating that dog. But the upper part of the dog was still intact. And so the dog was barking at everyone who was passing nearby, right? It's kind of angrily, still was so angry, even though it was suffering enormously. It was like so angry. And Asanga kind of felt like, whoa, like he felt really uncontrived compassion, like really genuine compassion, feeling like, whoa, this being, this creature is suffering so much, and yet it still has no control over its own karma and afflictions, being so angry at others at this very moment. So he was overwhelmed with this great compassion for the dog, and he decided to help it to take out the maggots, but of course without killing the maggots as well. And so in order then not to harm the maggots, this kind of bugs, right, that were eating the dog alive, he decided not to take them by hand, because that would kind of squash them and hurt them, but to lick them with his tongue, take them out with his tongue. And as soon as he reached that low part of the dog, with his mouth, opened his mouth with his tongue, trying to get out the maggots, the dog at that very moment appeared as the Buddha Maitreya. And so at that very moment he beheld, right? He had a vision. He saw the Buddha Maitreya right there where the dog was just a moment ago.
Dene laben tome ki jizun jamba kumbo ngosum du shal si yongdu simla da towa shu chumba ki girwa kawa shu chumba ki nyamdo la dene da ngazo yin ji to zo ji jizun jamba kumbo la nga kerang la dende yun rumbu ji kale kyamni tuba yin lo dega su mangbu ji la den kerang 닝제 길라지려 와스 잠바 인케랑은 닝제 매베 간데랭아 텐데 계랑 엄마니 알아드네 가레스 샤르 마틴바인 스탠다버드 드네 유니버 가레스 거바레스 kerangla nyingje shukchambo mebe sodawaji do sin da kong kang da tozo ji duge shor sodawaji na shensa ma shune chungbare la bare de labde chezon chamba kombo getini dende mare nga ngomani kerang nyamdo yes ina yang kerangla dipa di chenpo yoba songsa nga tong togo mindo songbare ta danda kerang lo mangbo jigla chosa dipchanche lakbardo danda kerangi chumingi nyingje kiya digi dipi bacha tawa deyang dini sebares diyinba songsa dini kerang nga tong bare dini songbare.
At that very moment when Asanga directly beheld his deity, Maitreya, the Buddha Maitreya, his mind, got overwhelmed with joy and delight. But together with that joy and delight, he also was a bit kind of like upset, tiny bit, let's say, Maitreya, sort of addressing him like, but why did it take you so long to appear? You're supposed to be this deity that embodies compassion, like loving kindness. That's your name, right? That's loving kindness. And where is your loving kindness? Why didn't you come earlier to me? I've been praying, I've been practicing, and you have betrayed me in this way. So he was kind of a bit like, sort of upset, we can say, at Maitreya Buddha questioning him. And to that, the Buddha Maitreya replied that I have always been with you all these years. All these 12 years, I've been right there in front of you. But because your own obscurations veiled your vision, you couldn't see me. It's your own afflictions, your own obscurations prevented you from encountering me. And it's these 12 years of continuous study and practice, and especially that moment of uncontrived, natural compassion, that genuine compassion that just arose in you, right? When you saw that poor dog, all of that together led to the moment where your obscuration, the veils have been lifted and you beheld me. But I actually, from my side, was always there next to you.
Ta digi nganzula kare sungbares, kare tembares na tekwa chenpo ki chö nyamnin chidu nega chenpo ni chigdi kare res na nyingje se di shira ki tsa chenpo chida nyuba chenpo chires kare res na ta kongri ngon na chosa dipchang ta nang digi yorwa ina yang dipa tawa di nyingje ke yongdu dini meba charu dini nyingje se di shira ki nyingbo top chenpo chi yinba tang tsa chenpo chi yinba chi digi tingi yore tingi du nipa di nga zu tekwa chenpo ki chö nyamlin che yongba kapsula chosa dipchang ke chubo shivuji tsigirwa chosa dipchang di maje na dini tokpa gyula kigi mares pena niluk tokwar cheba la yang dini chosa dipchang ondu toku gres lakwar du samu ki tanda tokpar cheba la dini ngebar du da chosa dipchang di pe ke chumbo res di chidang tepa chumbo dang lakwar du nganzu dorje tepe kapsula da shivuji di lamgi nega dawaji la zini nganzu nyamlin chigi yore pe sha na melong di nangla melong shilgo korang yoba ina yang sunyi share ki nyuba yoba ina melong di tsangma maso na sunyi shar togu marwa dinde yinba indi melong di nangla sunyi yabuji shar gugu tu tang kechi shuda garis melong ki thala di tsangma soya di pe kechumba res pe dus shane sungare oda di nibu di tanda kongi namdar ni dini nyingje di tsa chumba yinba tang chosa dipchang se di ke chumba yinba chi tenpa re tingidu.
What does this story, this particular, you can say, part of Asanga's life story teach us? What does it demonstrate? I think personally it teaches us two important aspects of the Mahayana, of the great vehicle Dharma. The first aspect that we can learn from this story, from this part of biography of Asanga, is that compassion is extremely important for the Mahayana. It's extremely precious for the Mahayana, and also it's really powerful. Because Asanga, at that point when he saw the dog, he has been studying and practicing for already a long time. So he had purified obscurations, right? Accumulated, merit, wisdom. It was there. But the most subtle obscurations were still there, preventing him from, encountering his deity Maitreya. And that powerful remedy to really clear away the most subtle, most stubborn obscurations, that remedy is compassion. Compassion is extremely powerful, really precious. It has that power to clear away the most subtle, stubborn, persistent obscurations of our mind. So that's one aspect we can learn from this. And the plane. And the second aspect that we can learn is the importance of gathering accumulations and purifying obscurations. Because without doing that, without really gathering wisdom and merit and purifying our afflictions, obscurations, we can never really attain realization. That's to say, realization means like we will not really come to realize the natural state of all phenomena. We will not come to realize how things truly are. Because in order to have that realization of the intrinsic nature, profound nature of all phenomena, we absolutely have to first to engage in gathering accumulations, purifying obscurations. This is really important in the path of Vajrayana, Vajra vehicle, right? An extremely crucial point. There's no realization. There's not really seeing the true nature without having previously purified our mind and gathered the accumulations. And the analogy that's given usually is that of a mirror. A mirror has capacity innate, well, it's kind of built in that capacity to reflect. Well, that's what mirror means, right? If it reflects an image, it's a mirror. But if a mirror's surface is really dusty, hasn't been cleared for a really long time, even though it has that innate capacity to reflect, we're not going to see anything in that mirror. And so what is really important is to clear away that dust from the surface of a mirror. You can see how this analogy works here, right? Exactly in the same way. What we need to do is we need to clear away the dust from our mind, so to say, right? This is what we have to do, and this is what we can learn. The second point that we can learn from this part of Asanga's life story, that's how I at least envision it.
Deni chizun jamba gombo ki loben tomi jesu sungni chizun jamba gombo shusa gatin layul du tini deni tanda ngaransu begyu nangden la yongda su yodebi ki tini jamchu de nga sini chue namba nga yore dinsu loben chizun jamba gombo ki tome la sung deni tome ki 마 미율라 페니 아니 덴데치니 다르벨 나와레 숭바레 다델라디니 제수 잠바 공부기 숭웨기 잠쉐 땡아 땅 데니 토메다 잉년기 딘줄라 데와기 줄들라 잠샤베기 슝딘줄라 남규응안수 베균난딩 나라 잠바단 절베기 최니슈스니 덴데스니 슈거레
Chö nishu. Okay, jamchö denga dan
잠시 땡아디 자와다오라바 델라티니 토메당 인인 코나바기 저와딘데 주자다멘달란 저와딘데 잠샤베기 슝 차상 돈베기 슝 니슈여레 딜라 템 잠바단데비 최 니슈스.
So after that encounter of Sangha and the Buddha Maitreya, what happened next is that Maitreya brought a Sangha with him to Tushita heaven, right, where Maitreya was residing. And as it is portrayed in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, what happened and there in the Tushita heaven is that Maitreya has taught what is known in Tibet as the Five Treatises, the five texts of the Buddha Maitreya. Right? So that's what happened there. The five treatises teachings of Buddha Maitreya were giving there to a Sangha in Tushita heaven, where there afterwards a Sangha returned to the human realm and propagated those five treatises, right? Known as Maitreya's Five Treatises. So he brought it back to the human world, and then he wrote them down, he propagated them widely. Also, his brother Vasubandhu helped him. He and Vasubandhu wrote commentaries on those five treatises of Buddha Maitreya, and so altogether it became known as the 20 Dharma teachings of Asanga, because, well, initially there is this five root texts, five treatises, of Maitreya, but afterwards when Asanga commented on them, wrote down commentaries and expanded on them, altogether became 20 teachings of Asanga.
러벤 토미나 잉이 이가기 되거든요.
Yeah, actually, sorry. Yes, the 20 teachings of both Asanga and Vasubandhu. Okay, together they did all that work, composing commentaries on the five treatises of Maitreya.
다 예 가장 공도 쉬바난시 아주 된데 랍용도 셈긴 낭라다 도바 용스바레 이나양 러벤 토미 라율라 페이규 말에 가르레스나 나도 투구민도 삼베토니르와 도바 용스바레 딘줄랑 아주 도바 제거에 나랑 게르깅은 시바에는 도바 제거에 여마레 팅도 가르레스나 이제 미기 로기시게 여마레 상계단 장주 셈바 딘조기 제바틴레게 남다르시게요레 예 가상 공도 쉬버나시 데인데 상계 연든 삼매캡 최기 연든 삼매캡 송바레 상계단 장주 셈바게 연된데서 된데 여초가 여바인데 되니 네 두구민도 나랑기 삼바게 나라 팀 나라 두구민도 세니 도바 제거에 여마레 띵도
At this moment, it will be nice to remind you what I have also spoke about a few Dharma sessions ago. Remember, I told you that when you encounter this kind of stories, like Asanga went to Tushita heaven, where he received the teachings, our minds prompt to doubt. Like, what? Well, what? How could he have gone to heaven and returned back to the human world? I cannot do that, so how could he do that if I cannot do it, right? That's kind of our minds function in this limited way. And honestly, I want to share just my personal understanding and relation to these kind of moments when we encounter these kind of teachings in the Dharma. I personally understand that, Asanga going to Tushita heaven, receiving teachings there has nothing to do with our human histories, human stories, narratives that are really limited by our human world. Because this story of Asanga going to Tushita heaven is a portrayal of enlightened activity of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Okay, so we have to separate here stories of human beings like us and life stories, like liberation stories that portray enlightened activities of Buddhas, bodhisattvas. It's not the same. As it is said, and I already told you, the Buddha's qualities are inconceivable. They cannot fit into our limited, kind of mind that has to make sense of everything. The Buddha's qualities, the Dharma, is inconceivable. So we shouldn't really think, oh, it because it does not make sense to me, according to my human understanding, according to understanding or rationale of my mind, it didn't happen, right? So we should really try to move away from that kind of reasoning of, oh, if it doesn't make sense, it didn't happen. Because we really have to remember that moment. Oh, right. It portrays Buddha's enlightened activity, which is inconceivable.
다치당 nganzu bela jamche tang lakbar du Gyud Lama tang chunyi namche tang tinsula shira ki zoba shira yo mare nganzu be Gyud nang tin chidang cheba ina chujala ti zu samlo tang su mitaba yore ina yang jizun jamba gombo ki sungni tome ma gyu shaba yimbala zume dawore teni chisu ta nganzu debe ki lo ta peche kazu ina tuju dunju gyaju nangla 아니 미 망보지기 잠주라 떠난중 학과도 귤라마게 주절라 떠난중 된 학과도 심주 같은데 망보기 단 눕쇼게 감니 대신 부서야 되라 떠난중니 다 잠주라 심주 망보지 난도 되니 순켄디 제준 잠바 공부서야디 사주기 장주 선바 단다 잠바 공부에 레베 수레 tene chasang de kongi sungware sungmare tene Gyud Lama denzo yang tene kashi tsawa insare kashi dewa insare se tawatang tene jamcho denga denzo chasang logyu gi wangdo cheongdo nyamdo dariyo mare kashi ngon la dare kashi chela dabare ta tende ki tene shimju mangbo shira nangdo denzo yampe yapore ngaransu logya ke la pengirwa ina yang ta
Karipinta gere?
lo di gyachumbo
Loge. Aha.
ta ina yang dinzu ki nyamsu le yong de sem de le la ta pene de ga su jik chimbo yada me sa di su samata re ting du de indi ta dinzu nge nge shira ko chu me la nge shu ge me wa ani 강다 당에 쉬에데 ngaransu begyu nangdengi luksu kare yimbati tema tegarchini mashugoyo ani kenamba dinzo kola sigdo yana yang tenda 심주 제샤 교기 슝망보도 된절레 signa 용도와
Generally, when these 5 treatises of Maitreya spread in Tibet, there has never been any debate about the history of these 5 treatises ever. Traditionally, all Tibetan scholars, practitioners, either way accepted that all 5 treatises were passed down from Maitreya to Asanga. That was never debatable. Of course, some interpretations of the teachings themselves, according to different schools of the philosophy, then yes, there were some points that were debated, but the historical account of how this text came to be was never debatable. So now in the last 60 years, let's say, when the Dharma spread in the West and also academics start studying it and researching a lot, there's quite a lot of interest in the topic of the Buddha nature, the Tathagata Garbha. And so the Uttara Shastra has been researched a lot. Different scholars, not Western, sorry, that's really limited of me as a translator, I'm sorry. Modern academia studied, researched the Uttara Shastra and other treatises of Maitreya, and there's a lot of questions that have been raised by the modern academia, like, oh, who was really this Maitreya, the author? Was he really a bodhisattva who resided on the 10th bhumi, or was it someone else? Were really all 5 treatises composed by the same author or not? Because actually the 5 treatises spread at different times and points in history, right? So of course then in academia there's this question of the authenticity, I mean, in terms of the same author. Also, when the Uttaratantra Shastra, Gyud Lama, was kind of was studied, some scholars found out that perhaps what is known as the root text in traditional Tibetan, accounts, perhaps maybe not everything is the root text, but some layer is the commentary that later made into the root text. So maybe perhaps not the whole thing was root text from the beginning, but some commentary later was added. So all these questions have been raised, and it's not bad, it's good. It really expands our understanding, studying, looking from this kind of academic point of view. But whether it helps us to tame our mind, I cannot say. Honestly, you need to see for yourself. Is looking from this academic historical approach helps you to train and tame your mind? Great. I cannot tell you, because I can only speak from a really traditional point of view, and that's what I will be doing in these Dharma sessions, right? I'm not going to go into those academic kind of points of debate, whether or not it's true or not. I'm going to teach you from my understanding that's just completely ingrained in the traditional, right, approach to study of the Buddha Dharma. But if you're interested, it's good. You can look. There are texts, researches, books from modern academics on the Uttara Tantra Shastra and other treatises. So by all means, you can also read those.
Tene 다 잠시 내가 나기낭라 실진 운동 게 세디 지그래 되니 도대견 세디 지그래 다 실진 운동 겐 세게 나라 쪼디 살람게 남샤디 시라긴 개봤던 샤 도디나 아주 곰 잡그러와 곰 냠린 제용배 값을다 셈기 빵자다 년보 타락망 보제로와 시라기 십자권이 숭샤바지 슝지 차대거래.
If we look at the 5 treatises of Maitreya, one of those treatises is the Abhisamailankara, Sanskrit title. It's the clear ornament of realization. Another one is the Mahayana Sutra Alankara, the ornaments of the Mahayana Sutra. So specifically this first one, the Prajna Paramita Abhisamailankara, the clear ornament, perfect ornament of realization, explains a lot the different aspects of the paths, the 5 paths, and the 10 bhumis, the 10 bodhisattva grounds. Because when it comes to meditation, there are many coarse and subtle aspects of the mind that have to be cleared away, like coarse and subtle obscurations that have to be purified, and coarse and subtle attainments that have to be realized. And there's a lot of those. And so in the Abhisamailankara is a really pretty voluminous text that goes into great detail of all those aspects that then we bring into our practice of meditation.
Tene 다 도대견 쉬에디 나라 상기기 태과 갓기 나라 되니 람망보 숭샤바디 베나 캡토세데 카레레 장주 셈케세데 카레레 간디스 캡수토고 그래 간디스 셈케고 그래 아니 파르진돌라 간디스 라고 그래 세기 차상 디추 루루 쇠샤바지라 도디긴 선슈거.
So this second treatise that I have mentioned, the Mahayana Sutra Alankara, the ornaments of the Mahayana Sutras, is really like a compendium, or compendium summary of all the Buddha's teachings on the various points of the Dharma, like refuge, what are the objects of refuge, how to go for refuge, or how to arouse the mind of enlightenment, what it is, how we practice the six paramitas, the six transcendental perfections. So all of those various teachings of the Buddha are combined then in this treatise of Maitreya, the Mahayana Sutra Alankara.
Teni 다 숨바디 위탄 남제 송이티 위탄 남제 나라 태과 첨보기 우메기 따와디 땐라 팝샤고 슝지레 지당 따와당 되니 따와디 냠수 렘베기 렌당 태과 투몽기 간데스 냠수 렌고 그래 투몽 마임바 태과 첨보기 람라 냠렌 제고디 간데스 냠수 렌고 그래 스니 다 쪼고디 따와당 곰바니가 쇼수 말롱와 우메기 람게 토니 냠렌치나 간데스 냠수 렌고 그래 써야 되다 돌뒤비 코니 텐샤고 소다오지 샤디게.
The third treatise, known in Sanskrit as the Madhyanta Vibhaga, in English distinguishing middle from the extremes, elaborates, it actually quite precisely, we can say succinctly explains the view of the middle way. The view and practice of the middle way done in the general vehicles and specifically in the Mahayana vehicle. So how do we realize that view of the middle way? How do we practice, meditate, all without falling into any extreme, but really remaining in the middle? So all of that is explained in a very succinct, concise manner in this third treatise, the Madhyanta Vibhaga.
되니 디젤라 춘이 남제 세드레 최당 춘이 남제 세드 시바디 다디나라 가레송에레스는 되니 상계기 사비기차 일룩 대양 돌드나 이 단기 쉐바나시 최세디 출바들라 순거여레 군녀야세 그래 춘이 세디가라 예시달라 세겨레 남버 미도 베시양 순거여레 남장달라 세겨레 당 안수기 셈 최암 출바디 춘이 담 예실라 간디스니 규르기레 세게드니 사비기 차디 세버지니 슝딘나나 텐샤바들라 춘이 남제 스니 슈거레.
The next, the fourth treatise, known as the Dharmata Vibhaga, distinguishing Dharmas from Dharmata, and in English would be distinguishing phenomena from their pure nature, explains the profound natural state of all phenomena, how the Buddha portrayed that natural state, intrinsic nature, Dharmata of all phenomena. So here, you can see from the title, distinguishing dharmas from dharmata. So dharma here refers to confusion. Remember at the beginning of this dharma session, I mentioned this confusion, which is like this samsara, right? The aspect of, you can say, afflicted mind. And there is the aspect of wisdom, pure non-conceptual wisdom of wakefulness, which is the purified mind of nirvana. So now this text clearly elucidates this profound point on how that confused state of mind can be transformed, can dawn as pure primordial wisdom of Dharmata, right? How the mind can then arise as Dharmata, as this pure wisdom. So that's what this particular text, Dharmata Vibhaga, clearly explains.
되니 다 타마암 ngapa디 다나가란수 로존차기 Gyud Lama 되니 다 데기낭라 지당 shilam desum tekpa chimbogi shilam desum ten yore ina yang de namgyun yongda la dorje ki ne dun se yore di ani kasu baba Gyud Lama di nala ten yongre la di nane da joja zo dawati karresna ani gyu dewara shepi ningbaam kam se di da kandere 아니 디 간데스 원도 제고 그래서 디 슝네 나라 세보진 때요래.
And the last fifth treatise of Maitreya Buddha is the one that we are concerned with here in this Dharma sessions, the Uttaratantra Shastra, the highest continuum. That's what we are studying, practicing here. And this text deals with the ground, path, and fruition of the Mahayana. But more specifically, what it explains, what it teaches, teaches the topic of the 7 Vajra points. That's how they are known, the 7 Vajra points. And even more specifically, among those 7 Vajra points, this text is primarily concerned with the point, the 4th point of the 7, the point of the element. Element, Kam, Dhatu in Sanskrit, here means Buddha nature. It means this continuum, the cause, which is the Tathagata Garbha or Buddha nature. We can say that's the main subject matter of this text.
나 대양 수 도르디션은 고대버제나 ngaranzu 차상 nga세기 주주사지 사리기 다니진이 셈지여와 대기 ngô am 랑신디 가르레스나 살동 송죽 대나니 쪼어디니 외살와 세디레스니 차디겨레 오다티 간데 임비 인술디 릭바당 빼당 김세 망보지 거니 아니 슝디게 때나 파비온 거야레
Even to put it in a more convenient way to understand, the main subject matter of this text is, here I have to go backwards, is luminosity. So usually the so-called I, me, is when we try to point it out, like what is this so-called I? Where do we really point our finger? We point it to this cognizant, clear and aware mind, right? That which is cognizing, that which is aware of everything, that's where we point our finger and say that's I. And that mind's nature, the one that's clear and aware, that nature of that mind is the unity of luminosity and emptiness. And among these two aspects of this unity, although they are inseparable, obviously that's what unity means, they are inseparable, but this text primarily emphasizes this aspect of clarity or luminosity. So this text teaches us what is this luminosity, how is it? It explains it so we can really resolve it by means of reasonings. We can resolve it and understand it by means of examples given in this text, by means of different logical argumentations presented in this text.
다 대양 다동도지 고대버제나 남주인 ngaranzu다 지 Who am I? Sene question shungorwa ngasure seje 다 shungdigi 걔랑 언니 디스레 세디 디시캬바절라 차디게다 귤라마 럽종 장세디 언니 나랑 수레 나랑 언니 디스레 세디 럽종 장바절라 레 세디 samotangko 그래.
And again, if we really want to even really bring it home, like really make it super clear, something really relatable, what is the main subject matter of the text? Really, the main subject matter, the main topic is something that answers this question that arises in all of us sooner or later. Who am I? Oh, who is this I? Who am I? So this text really clearly explains that kind of answer to this question that we'll have.
Tini digi lendi answer di shiraki surprising dawji unexpected dawji.
Actually, prepare yourself that the answer to this question, who am I, is going to be quite surprising. You are not really prepared to hear that answer.
Laso nga dela ta tiring zowo di nga zu tenjue ki tsenge nangla donda sumi yobe nangni tangbo tekwa chenpo se de karere se dutini di loben tome ki namdar tang tebe koni shubare da chidang chenpo dunya segre ma tanga jab yongdu yinayanda ngi kasheji keche che den su dus jani shubare di indu ta ngaranzo ya tekwa chenpo ki chue di ngune dani ki tekwa chenpo ki dulo gamba tsamchi mayin par susu jesha pi chue di yang tekwa chenpo ki chue da cha gugudu na loben tome ki namda nangla chungsha pa nanshin mikpa tang zunru tang nyingje tang 아니 mögü dang nang chosa ryuchang dinde chigi kala dini dub gugre sine da nga zu di nga zu xie gugre lobchong di chang gu ha gugre dini da shenba dinzu ani nga zu chudun chema nang la dini nge mituni ma shugi yins.
So today in this class, what we have looked at as one part among the three parts of the title, right? Title consists of three parts, and we looked at one part of that, which is the word Mahayana, the great vehicle, and I explained that part of the title, the Mahayana, through the lens of looking at Asanga's life story, Asanga's biography. And specifically, when we look at Asanga's story, what we took out of it is the 7 greatnesses of Mahayana. So actually, there's this list of 7 greatness of Mahayana. Of course, I didn't go for all 7, but I mentioned the most important ones that we could really, that we should learn, that we should understand, because that's what really will enable us to be genuine practitioners of the Mahayana. Just us wearing some special clothes, some special attire will not make us Mahayana followers. But if we really want to make sure that what we practice does belong to the great vehicle, we absolutely need to have those kind of greatnesses in our own practice. And so we looked at those points of greatness in Asanga's life story so we can really assimilate that. Like one of the greatness is focus. It's a great objective. Another one is the great diligence. Right? We learned that from Asanga as well. Another one is the great compassion, the great skillful means, the great devotion, the great practice of gathering accumulations and purifying obscurations. So really, if we want our practice to be Mahayana, we need to know those great qualities of Mahayana and make sure that they are present in our own practice. So we learn them by looking at Asanga's life story that then helps us to understand Mahayana, which is part of the title, right? And there are other great qualities of the Mahayana. As I said, there are 7, and we will continue looking at those in the next Dharma sessions.
Mare nga zu saji jidu
Mare?
tekwa chenpo se de sar suan la ta dini Gyud Lama se ki joja de tang dini
Last
tenju se
Gyopa.
gopa ho tenzu ani nge.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Translator apologizes. She made a mistake. We actually done with this first aspect among the 3 of the title. We done with the explanation of the Mahayana. We looked at that, and I explained the most important out of 7 greatnesses. So we're done with that. On the next Dharma sessions, we'll continue with the sorry, the Zoom just disappeared. Sorry. In the remaining Dharma sessions, we'll look at the remaining 2 parts of the title. That's the Gyud Lama itself, the highest continuum, and another one is the word treatise. And by looking at those remaining two parts, what I will explain is the two remaining parts of our outline, right, of this preparatory class, which is the subject matter of the text and the purpose of studying the text. Gava, Khenpo DJ, mas, mas.
So,
So we stop here then.
Janju Simju Rinpoche Mage Bana Mke Gyureche Keba Nyambara Meba Yang Gone Gondo Pelvare Sho